Well, welcome to My Life in Football, and it's a privilege to say that, of course, we're back for a part two of the My Life in Football with the one and only, the living legend, of course, Mr. Keith Hackett. And we left it last week, Keith, with yourself just finishing the 1981-82 season with the cup final with between Spurs, Man City, and the Ricky Villa upset in the first game, and then sort of what happened to him in the second game. And of course, after that sort of season was over and everything else, he was then sort of appointed in 84 to the Charity Shield match between Everton and Liverpool. And was that a little bit different? Was that a little bit more, I can put it, more relaxed maybe than an FA Cup?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, and I'd matured because in 81 I became a FIFA international referee, and so I was going to tournaments. I went out to Mexico and learned a lot from other referees. I was in the company of international referees. The 8 weeks that I had in the North American Soccer League, you're coming across world-class players, and some of them, I can remember Escadorian was a player that was an hatchet man, and I would already pre-warn, watch this guy because he does daft things. But there are other interesting things I once offered to referee New York Cosmos versus Vancouver Whitecaps, which was always a difficult game. And I'm stuck in my car in Lincoln Tunnel. I've got a chauffeur-driven car to take me to the match. And all of a sudden, we're altered. And I'm looking at the watch. I'm thinking, I've still got plenty of time. And then all of a sudden, my driver jumps out of the car, starts ranting in what I thought was Spanish. And, a guy had run past, and I thought he'd banged a car, or there was an accident, or he was going to the accident or whatever. Then all of a sudden, this guy he opens the door, gets the royal treatment, I push across, he gets into the car, back seat with me, and I look through the mirror, and I'm going, that's Carlos Alberto, which it was. And then he couldn't understand. I mean, we had a good chat, but he was surprised that when I got something like 400 or 500 yards from the stadium, I suddenly said to the driver, tapped him on the shoulder, said, listen, I'm getting out here. He goes, no, it's okay. We're going to the stadium. No, I'm getting out here. I don't think it's right that I would be seen with instantly recognizable Carlos Alberto. I'm about to referee. And the referee walking in alongside him. So yeah, those sort of things. I always enjoyed going to Anfield and Everton, Goodison. It was on a regular beat, and I've been fortunate to see some great players, and one of the great players was Kenny Dalglish, and people often ask me who's the best player I refereed, and sometimes I say Kenny Dalglish on the basis of 100%. Terrific player. Gave you a bit of hit. I can remember my first game in the middle at Anfield. I'd blown the whistle. I was still a bit naive as a referee, and there's a foul, and I've given it, and Emily News is unhappy, and I've given it, I'm not changing my mind, get on with the game. And he comes up and gives me a bit. And I've gone, listen, if you don't shut up, I'm going to caution you, mate. And I don't recommend referees do that anymore, but I recommend that they say I want an improvement. But anyhow, I've decided now, because he's given me a right blast, I've gone, okay, we're obviously not going to get on. What's your name? He goes, what? I go, what's your name? What for? You're going in my book. You what? You want my name? Don't you know who I am? I've gone, what is your name? And I've gone, what? Hemling. He goes, what? You don't spell Emlyn. It's Emlyn. Emily News. I went, that's all I wanted, your name. And interestingly, after that, we came, when he retired and became manager of Rotherham United, he used to play in local football. And so he were amazed that I'd be refereeing. He'd go, what are you doing here? I'm going, well, like you're doing, what you're doing here. We enjoy the football, and we did. So there were those sort of things that I remember.
I mean that game in '84, though. I mean, again, Everton at that sort of time were sort of like coming up, weren't they? They were sort of getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And of course, they beat Liverpool 1-0, courtesy of a Bruce Grobbelaar own goal.
Yeah.
Which, you know,
yeah, that was Bruce Grobbelaar. You know, I mean, yeah, is there the same level of personalities in the game? I'm sure there are. I mean, you get to know them perhaps a little more when you're out in the middle. You see the different personalities. They're not always, you know, aggressive. You know, I can remember going to Old Trafford and refereeing Joe Jordan and McQueen. They'd just come from Leeds United. And I knew that Joe, I mean, I didn't get to Leeds very often because as a Sheffield born and bred guy, I was a Yorkshireman. You know, I'd only refereed at Leeds 2 or 3 times in my career. But I can remember that game, and I can always remember Joe Jordan. He had this ability to catch the ball between his 2 arms low down, and no one ever gave handball. And I'm going, you know, I sat one day and I'm thinking, that's handball. It's definitely handball. He's controlling it with his arms, and his arms are part of the scenario. And I can remember at Old Trafford, he's done it, and I'm thinking, I'm in here. I've given it, not for any glory or anything. I've just given the free kick. And he comes absolutely storming towards me with Scottish expletives of the highest level. And I've looked at him. I've said, Joe Jordan, yeah, you're banned from Stringfellas nightclub. And he looked at me bemused. And I see him, and I'm away then, because the one thing that referees do now, modern referees, is they stay with a player when they've, and you need to get your backside out of the place. Don't allow him to argue with you. Get out of the way. Anyhow, so I've actually said he's banned from Stringfellas, and I see this conversation going on between Joe Jordan and McQueen. And of course, he comes up and says, how can you ban me from Stringfellas? I go, well, my brother's actually a director of Stringfellas nightclub, mate, and you go there because he tells me. And I'm just going to pick the phone up and say, ban him for a couple of weeks. that was a sort of conversation we had in the middle of a game at Old Trafford.
But he said, of course, well, in '86, he refereed the League Cup final. And I don't mean this to be disrespectful to the 2 teams involved, but you go into a League Cup final, especially these days, you'd never get these 2 sides. It sort of, well, unusual, I doubt if you would get them into a cup. So you get a cup final, expect it to be sort of, should we say, a super glamorous tie, maybe a Liverpool or Manchester United and Arsenal or whoever else in that sort of final, Tottenham. And, you know, the League Cup final that year in '86, of course, was between Oxford United and Queen's Park Rangers. I mean, again, was that at Wembley in those days, or was it still at Wembley then, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, yeah. And I mean, Robert Maxwell, the great entrepreneur, owned Oxford United. But the link was that Jim Smith, who was born in Sheffield, had been the manager for some time with Oxford, and then had recently switched to QPR to be their boss. So that was quite an amazing thing. And I'd come across Jim Smith, not only when he was at Derby and manager and various other great clubs, but also when he was manager of Boston United early in my career. And so there was that familiarization. We knew each other, and that was beneficial. But yeah, I think everybody said QPR are the favourites to win. And of course, they didn't. Oxford went on to win. It was a great game for Oxford. It was football. For me, it doesn't matter who the teams are. If you're, you know, it's a trip to Wembley, and very honoured to have QPR and Oxford. You know, I can remember a cup game at QPR, which comes to mind. And I worked at Romford, and I was going across. They were playing Southampton in a cup game, and I was stuck on Bayswater Road in my car. I'd been there half an hour. I hadn't moved an inch, and I was beginning to panic. And I rang the club secretary at QPR and said, "Look, I've got a major problem. I'm stuck in traffic on Bayswater Road. I'm trying to get to the ground. I've not covered an inch in the last half hour. If this continues, there's no way I'm going to get to the ground. And he said to me, well, we've already got a problem. We've only got one linesman here at the moment, so he might be in the same traffic. And the next thing was that I told him the registration of the car. And then I get a motorcyclist, police officer, taps on the window about 10 minutes later, goes, park your car on the pavement here and just put the hazards on. Give me the keys, which I did. And I got on the back of his bike with my bag on the back and to QPR. But that same game, the linesman hadn't turned up. So they make a public announcement. Is there any referee in the ground, anybody with any officiating experience to come through? And we finish up with two people. There's a guy who's overage, clearly, but he's been a Southern League assistant referee. And I'm thinking, that's a good level. So I asked the other kid, I said to him, right, how long have you been a referee? 6 months. I go, right, fine. I'm going for the older guy and experience. So I said, look, I'm really sorry, I'm going to go with this experience. And he rolls up his sleeve and he's got QPR forever on his and he says to me, it's perhaps as well, ref, that I wasn't selected because any dodgy decisions would have gone QPR's way. I'm a QPR man through and through. Those are sort of incidents before a game. But that was on the old concrete
plastic.
pit.
Yeah.
Oh God, yeah. I can remember Terry Fenwick jumping about a foot off the ground and the ball travelling about 50 foot above on the first bounce.
Oh, yeah. Nightmare. But I mean, this is internationally, you went to the 1988 European Championships. Was that the first sort of FIFA UEFA competition you've been to in 88?
No, I was regularly going to games in Europe. So I was getting the runs out, the odd game. You know, you obviously you remember Real going to Portugal, refereeing. You know, I refereed East Germany against Switzerland and went through Checkpoint Charlie. I remember refereeing Gdansk versus Juve when the shipyard workers were still, and Solidarity was still in its fair infancy. You know, I met Lech Walesa at that particular game before the match. So you're getting that constant game out in Europe. And having had the semi-final running the line in '84 to get the opening game of the '88, I knew, because everybody said this is just about the worst game you can be appointed to. Why? Well, the league will be telling you how to referee it. Everybody will be telling you how to referee it. And there'll be the euphoria of expecting you to set the standard of which officiating is going to happen. So I went out to that game with a colleague, Neil Midgley and Brian Hill, two FIFA international referees, and they ran me the line. It was a good experience. It was a difficult one because here again, we had the situation where the law had been changed, 4-step rule. You know, the goalkeeper could only take no more than 4 steps. And Germany were in the league. I think it was, I've forgotten who was in the lead, but just before half time, Walter Zenga, the Italian goalkeeper, has forgotten the law. And I've explained it to them before kickoff. And at half time, I sent a note, to the team at both teams, reminding them that 4-step rule would be applied. And of course, in the second half, Zenga goes on walkabout, and I've gone, even I'm going to have to blow for that one. And from which Germany scored, equalised. So yeah, it was the opening game. It wasn't brilliant, but it's when you realise that you're not just refereeing a football match, you're actually managing an event.
Did you get any more games during that?
No, because it didn't work the same way as it does now. You know, FIFA and UEFA went to a tournament scenario, which is much better. You would fly in and fly out.
Right.
You know, a UEFA game generally, unless you were out in Russia, would be 3 days. In Russia, it'd be 4. Kazakhstan 4. So if you know, those sort of scenarios, and on this one, it was a 4-day event. Day before, then you get all the preparation and the countdown clock and all that goes with it.
I mean, so we, you know, looking at it, sort of, you know, what is Premier League as such, and you've done, you know, the FA Cup final, the Charity Shield, League Cup, European Championships, and then in '88, the Olympics as well.
Yes.
I mean, that's you know, it must have been an amazing thing to go to.
I'll tell you what, it was the best tournament I've ever been to. I had a badge that I wore that could get me into any sporting event. You know, I watched Daley Thompson and the pole snapped. I watched many of the other sports. Sat with the Olympic coaches, which was really interesting, the athletics guys. And, you know, I picked up on how sports psychology had such an important part to play in athletics and preparation, the detail, the minutiae of, you know, I'm sat with a guy who's, I think it was 10,000 meters. I think it might be 10,000, it might be 5,000 meters. I'm sat with a coach of one of the runners, a Kenyan. And we'd actually been talking football. And he told me that he was a coach for the Kenyan team. And he was based in London. Most of the Kenyan runners were there. And so we got chatting, and I went and sat with him on this, I can't remember, it was 5 or 10,000. Anyhow, he's got a sheet in front of him, and he's got in front the times of the laps. And let's say they're not, but let's say there's 60 seconds, 60, 60, 60. Then all of a sudden, there's like a 50 or a 55 in it. And I've gone, he's gone all this way, and then he's got to do that. And, you know, to pass the FIFA test in refereeing terms, we had to do 400 meters in less than 70 seconds, and they were doing it in 50 odd. And all of us, and I've gone, and I've said to him, because I've got his crib sheet, and I'm going, why have you at this point, why are you going to put a sprint in? Like, why are you going to go fast? And he goes, Keith, if he achieves those 3 lap times, he's won the race, because nobody can stay with him. And I watched it. And then I watched the coach put his laptop down, and he goes, I've done my job. And I go, what do you mean? No, he's going to get the gold medal. And he did. And I suddenly thought, this is not just about psychology, this is about the preparation and the detail of the preparation. And so when I took over the PJMOL, having been there when the Premier League was formed, and, you know, I'd lost 2 jobs through referee. You know, I'd refereed New Zealand versus Australia. And as I come off the pitch and went back to my hotel, I was informed that I was suspended by the garage door company I worked for 17 years. So that was the end of my career there. And I then spent 3 months out of work. And I can remember getting a phone call from UEFA saying, Mr. Hackett, we're delighted to inform you that you are going to referee the European Cup final. And I said to him, well, I've just started a new job, and I'm going to have to ask if I can get time off. Because that same season, they'd appointed me to do Stuttgart versus Feyenoord in a European Cup game. And the board of directors had informed me there was going to be a board meeting I had to attend. And it was the morning after the match. And I knew then I'd got to get back, but I'd already committed myself to doing this game. Yeah. And as a result of that, the only way I could get back was to, under my own expenses, charter an aircraft. So I had a twin-seater plane fly out from Blackpool Airport to Stuttgart. And then we took off at 4 in the morning at Stuttgart after a postal, because the airport was closed for runway repair. After a postal aeroplane had landed, we took off. And we then got permission to fly through German airspace to make up lost time. So those sort of things are all in that myriad of what happens as a referee that you know, you almost find disbelieving. And then at the same time, of course, in 81, I got a call from Paul Stewart, who was the editor of Shoot magazine, and would I do You Are the Ref with Paul Trevelyan, the artist. So I took over from Clive Thomas doing that book for a number of years, and then into the Guardian strip. So yeah, great.
Did you get the European Cup game?
No.
You couldn't get it off?
Couldn't get time off.
Oh. What was the game?
I can't remember what the game. Real Madrid were one of the teams because I got a. It was interesting because a few years later, I was the match delegate in Madrid. I was now a UEFA delegate, marking the referee's performance, and the guy came up and chatted to me and took me to their unbelievable. If you're ever in Madrid, go and have a look at their trophy room because it's unreal. I think they employ about 3 guys polishing every day. And he took me to and said, "Look, this was the game that you should have had. We were aware that you were the referee, and we were also fully aware that you couldn't get time off." And I went, "Yeah." And so as a result of that, it stimulated when I retired from refereeing that refereeing should move into the professional environment. We should have professional referees in order, as the game was getting quicker, pass-back law had altered the dynamic, players were getting fitter, referees needed to get fitter. And so I chatted with Sir Dave Richards, who was Dave Richards then, Graham McCrell and others to say, look, it has to move in this direction. And Philip Dunn, who was then an international referee, been to the World Cup, really terrific guy. He was appointed the general manager, knowledgeable guy, but only lasted 18 months. I think the Premier League decided to release him, which I thought was always a shame, and I took over.
I mean, Philip Don, the one game that always reminds me of him was we went to Highbury to watch an Arsenal reserve game against Reading reserves, and it was Tony Adams' first game back from being in jail, and he came out and his issues and so forth and so forth, and he was actually the referee for that reserve game. When they said that there was only be a couple of hundred people there, and there was close to about 12,000 people turned up. To see him come back. But just one. I mean, something you before we go into that sort of very, very famous game in 1991, which was another one that sticks in my memory. Something you just said then, and I know at non-league level, like in the Southern League and Isthmian leagues and leagues that I've been involved in, one of the things that the managers there around referees that they still don't understand to this day is why referees get told when an assessor is going to be in the crowd. And one of the things they asked me about that is because a referee might referee, say, with common sense in games, but the minute the assessor's sitting in the stand, and they know the assessor's sitting in the stand, common sense then seems to go out the window, and they have to referee it to the book. So is there a reason why the referees get told there's an assessor in the crowd?
I think to some degree that might happen with certain referees, but not across the broad spread of refereeing. And I think there's a misunderstanding as to what the assessor is doing. The assessor is, in fact, looking at all aspects of that referee's performance, his fitness levels, his interaction with players, the quality of decision making. He's supporting that referee in terms of helping him if the referee's had a poor game, trying to analyse why, where. Ultimately, at the end of the day, he's given a mark. I think it's more the referee's reaction rather than the assessor's reaction. And I think it's interesting because I think one of the demise of referees recently in the Premier League has been Mike Riley's decision to dispense with the services of a match assessor at the game at Premier League level and also at Championship level. And the reason I say that isn't because he's policing the overall performance of the referee. The assessor, the referee can get a great deal of encouragement and honesty from that match assessment. So I'm for assessors. But at the same time, when I became the boss of the PGMOL, I recognise that everybody's perception is that it's policeman policing policeman in that same role. And so I knocked on the door of the Premier League and said, look, I would like you to create a panel of match delegates. And the delegate panel is made up of former players and managers. You know, if you think of Dennis Smith at Stoke City being one, you know, and many others, John Duncan, being a match assessor, a former manager of Chesterfield. So I think what that gave was a balance. So there was a guy who was a former player going into the dressing room, listening to what the referees had to say, doing the debrief with the referee and getting a balance of both the assessor and the thing. It really is down to the training of the assessor. That's
I think one of the other things, I do a Monday night show with a guy called Keith McMahon, a manager that's sort of like step 3, step 4 level. And he's always gets tagged with being, how can I put this, against referees. But he came up once with an idea for our sort of level at that sort of stage, because you found that more and more as we were doing the show, you get more and more people complaining about referees and about performances, et cetera, et cetera. And you know, and how much they've got to pay a referee because of how far they've got to travel, et cetera, et cetera. He just turned around and he said, look, I want to try and help referees. In fact, I think someone from the FA even contacted him as well. And he just said, look, why is it that we've not got 3 or 4 referees that are a group? And they move around to these different matches as they go along. So you've got four there that know each other. You'll have all of them can referee at that level, et cetera, and then they go around in teams. So they all know each other. They've got that familiarity with each other. He said, and why is it also that the FAs and the local FAs haven't got some kind of a like a fitness, not like fitness test, but almost where they go and they get fitter and they learn stuff about more like a think tanks, you know, across their. So they've got training through the season, as well as just being sent an email saying the new rule is the 4-step rule for referee, you know, for goalkeepers. And he got quite a lot of positive feedback from that. And, you know, and the FA said, you know, came back to him and asked him to explain it a little bit more in a positive way, not in a in trouble or anything, but I'm just interested how you feel, you know, how you think of sort of Northern Premier League level and Southern League level and Isthmian level. Would you think that might be something that might be something that could work?
Well, I think first of all, one of the, if you like, negatives that is in football at the moment is that we used to have the Referees Association. It is still there. And the Referees Association at the time that I started refereeing was in fact the body that literally coached, supported the referee. So I could go to the Sheffield Referees Association, sit in a room, listen to other referees chat, have a chat, and alongside me could be like George McCabe, FIFA International referee. I could ask his advice and seek his advice to give it openly. In the same way that that same Referees Association would, as Sheffield RA does at this moment in time, it has pre-season training sessions. Now, referees do take a fitness test. The FIFA fitness test is what they take. The problem I have with that is that is right to have a fitness test, but that's fit to pass a test, not fit to referee. And so I qualify that the Premier League referee are pass a fitness test and they're fit. What I'm about is where is the balance between the dynamics of movement within the game and the dynamic movement of the referee. The process of a referee is to see, recognize, think, and act. That's the process. And invariably, I've analysed thousands of wrong decisions as well as correct decisions. And it's that inability to see that is the fallout of a wrong decision. That means proximity to play and gaining a viewing angle. You know, often you see the play going down the left channel and the referee's following the left channel, and I'm shouting literally, move out left, move out right, get an angle. And so those are the things that you coach. So I think the premise of referees having adequate training, having regular meetings, is vital in order to get advancement in refereeing. And that structure could be better. But what happened some years ago was that when David Ellery took over as chairman of the referees committee at the FA, he wanted, like Philip Don, they wanted control of the entire training operation, because I think they saw that as a vehicle to make money rather than the need to invest in time, experts' time, for free for the individual. The other side is that there's a shortfall at least 10%. And when, you know, I've quoted this on social media, there's a shortfall of referees in England, 10%, and I get 50%. We're 60% short. In my day, when I took the referees examination, it cost me nothing, or just my time. If a guy you want to encourage somebody, and I'm president of Penistone Church, and last year we took 6 people, right, and we spent just short of £1,000 to put those 6 people onto FA refereeing courses, in order, because we as a club were having youngsters, and we run 30 teams, 7 upwards, and the difficulty is you stand around and they've no referee, and that's the breeding ground for indiscipline. And so what I would be asking your guy is, I think he's right and I support what he's doing, but I also say to him, you know, when your players are coming and you see a player that's going to finish his career at the end of the season, can you as a club encourage him to become a referee? Can you actually suggest to him that he might become a referee? And then if you've got a junior team, he might come and referee their teams on a regular basis. So I think it's at the moment, in certain parts of the country, the management and training of referees is excellent. If, you know, in the last weekend, I know it's been a conference of the Premier League and Football League referees, and they go over a weekend and they have people. I think Dion Dublin was the guy who led the conference as a whole. But in that, managers come and coaches come and they have the debate and discussion. They see the new law changes and then they know how to apply them. So, yeah, I think that communication is important. And that's not what we've seen, is it, from the PGMR at the top, because things cascade down. We've seen some awful refereeing, really at the level that it should never be at. And, you know, no levels of accountability and no explanation sometimes as to why they've come to a decision that is so wrong. I mean, if you look at the impact that this can have on teams, it can be enormous.
We're talking about ill discipline. Of course, you know, going back to, you know, your sort of story, you refereed a match in 1991 league encounter between deadly rivals, shall we say, Manchester United and Arsenal at Old Trafford, where the match was notorious for the 21-man brawl breaking out after just over an hour. I mean, did you see it coming? Did you?
No.
It just bang. I mean, talk us through what.
Well, I think
people that don't know, talk us through exactly how it came about.
Well, there were 2 players on the deck getting up and having a bit of an altercation. This is what I saw. and then a complete pile-in. I think there was only David Seaman who didn't join in, but everybody else did. And it was all so quick. And I stood there and thinking, if I send him off, I've got to send him off. If I send him off, I've got to send him off. How many can I send off within the credible situation? What have I actually seen? Is this handbags at 10 paces or not? And remember, I can't review it. I've got to capture all that. And at the same time, as a big guy, I've piled in. So I'm like in, and rather than the sort of modern view is to stand out and watch it all take place, blow the whistle like crazy, and then sort it. But my style was to pile in, and I piled in. And of course, you lose a lot of vision of what's happening. And so at the end of the game, both managers came in and said, look, I'm going to report the matter to the FA. And the FA will sort it out, don't worry. And then, of course, I'm called to a meeting in the FA. We start to play the video, and the chairman sort of looks over his glasses and said, if you'd have seen this on the day, what would you have done? A red card. I think that was Brian McClare who was having a kick at somebody. And what about this red card? So you've now issued 2 red cards. Oh, certainly. I said, but I can do that looking at the video, but that's not allowed, is it? What I've suggested to you is that there's been an outburst, and I think both clubs were quite honest in their perception of what had taken place. And then, of course, on the way home, I arrived, pick up the local paper, and after the hearing, and both teams have been deducted points. I think it's still the only thing that came out of it. I don't think any other team's been deducted points. However, you then advance in your career, because then you say, right, how can you manage that situation more effectively? Because somebody, the sort of book referees, those guys that are always your colleagues, but they're always willing to tell you what they would have done. And of course, they're all saying, oh, Keith, I'd have sent 3 or 4 off. I said, look, I'd have sent 21 off. I said, and David Seaman could have just patted the ball and played on his own. And David, of course, is a Rotherham lad, close to where I live. And so we had all those scenarios. And I think ultimately, at the end of the day, there was a trend coming in the game. This had happened before. Arsenal-Norwich had a bit of a fallout and a bit of a mass confrontation. And so the FA were trying to determine what to do. And when I refer some years later, when I became the boss of the PGMOL, I decided that in certain scenarios, I would lay a criteria of action, a process. So that process, I think, came through really well with Howard Webb in the 96 Carling Cup final, when in about the 90th minute, 2 players have a scrap, and he decides they all pile in a similar fashion. Mourinho and Wenger's on the pitch, and anyhow, the outcome is that he sorted it out. And what we've done there is we've said, right, okay, first of all, blow your whistle, try to stop it. The 2 assistant referees come in, they're monitoring. The referee then goes through red cards, and he asks his 2 assistants, are there any more red cards that you've seen that I've not seen? So the scenario was, he's now got 2 players on red cards that are walking off. And of course, you then say, in this criteria, the team of the away team player is sent off first. And you then give him space. Because if you remember Billy Bremner and somebody having a fight because they're walking off together.
Yeah.
So to avoid that, you send the first guy off who's the away team player. And then if it's the home team player, he follows with sufficient distance. Then you say, are there any more? And in this case, the assistant said to Howard, Ango Below has got to go as well, because he's lost his head, completely lost his head. He was beginning to get it back when told he'd shown the red card, he blows up again. And then the referee goes through his yellow cards. So there's a process that improves the scenario for that situation. The Premier League, by the way, also decided that when they had a series of mass confrontations, that a fine would be paid of up to $250,000 for failing to control the players in these scenarios. Now, they've never got to that point. I don't think they ever suggested they would get to that point, but they've had the 50,000. So 2 points, the points were deducted. I think the history was taken into account to get the level. But, you know, as a referee, you referee a football match, you blow the final whistle, and then you review your performances over the next couple of days. What would I have done any different? And what do I do now? You know, it's pretty evident that you have to be prepared much better. And Pierluigi Collina, the Italian referee who's now in charge of FIFA referees, he could tell you which boot the player kicked on. His detailed analysis of the teams and the tactics and all that go with it. So that's, if you like, from that particular point to where we're at now. Referees have to have an understanding of the tactics that are being employed.
I mean, two sort of last questions for you, and before we let you go, and I suppose it comes up because two of these gentlemen are two people that we've done this show with before. One did the show, was in the premiere of the show, and one just recently as well, and they connected with you quite well. So we'll ask the question, and one's a funny question, one's a more sort of a serious question. I suppose the funny question first. I mean, I suppose one of the stories that we heard, of course, was the incident with a certain Mr. Tony Gale. I mean, do you want to talk us through
I suppose it's still it's something that I focus on from time to time. It's always raised because you're remembered not by the cup final of 81, but by the dismissal of Tony Gale. And I still get fair amount of abuse. And I did get death threats that the police took fairly seriously. So there was that negative side of it. The reality is that had that incident that took place, which was the denial of an obvious goal scoring opportunity, had it taken place a few days before, let's say the Wednesday, Tony Gale would have had a free kick awarded against him. The game would have continued. But on the Thursday leading up to this particular game, and a major game changer for me in terms of how I reacted afterwards, in terms of the need for the stakeholders in the game, everybody, to be informed about how law is changed and how it is applied. So I'm called to a meeting the Thursday before that Sunday game at Villa. And in that meeting, we're told that our interpretation of the denial of an obvious goal scoring opportunity is incorrect. We were applying an approach that the challenge was cynical. And therefore, when a challenge wasn't cynical, we weren't dismissing. And FIFA said that's the incorrect interpretation. They outlined very clearly that a foul that denies an obvious goal scoring opportunity is sufficient. And we were gobsmacked as referees. Were saying, what? Any foul, obstruct any foul, if it denies. And of course, you're faced with a situation that you walk out of Villa Park, it's back of your mind. It's not going to happen because rarely do you have that scenario. And if you look back at my history, neither am I a referee that issues red cards like confetti. And I prefer to manage more effectively in that sense. Tony Gale brought Gary Crosby down. Gary Crosby's on his way to goal. I see it as a foul. Tony certainly doesn't see it as a foul, but it's a foul. It's a small foul. And of course, then comes the massive shock. The shock of him receiving a red card when he didn't think he was going to get anything. And of course, The entire stadium didn't. The media didn't. People like Bobby Charlton didn't. And you stood there and your Aunt Sally, because then you've ruined the game, and it ruined the game. There's no question it ruined the game. And I can remember coming into the car park after the game, walking to the car. My two colleagues were aware, they'd been at the meeting. So as such, they knew exactly, what bad luck, in a sense. And I'm going, well, don't talk to me about bad luck. It's a bloody stupid law. And I've got to apply it. And as I was putting my kit in the boot of my car, in the car park, this FA guy, I'll remain nameless, came up to me, shook my hand and said, brilliant. And I've gone, what? Brilliant. I've gone, you're kidding me. And he's gone, well, Keith, if you hadn't applied that dismissal, you'd have probably been suspended yourself for failing to apply the laws. And I go, well, I'll tell you what, the game's getting odd when in a game like today, the game is ruined by a referee's decision. And it's something that I'm not proud of. But, I've talked to people in the past. It's certainly changed now, because it's why I communicate, it's why I do shows, why I talk to fans, why I've done, even when I was an active referee, I would go to fans forums, I would as the boss of the PGMOL, I'd go on media, television, radio, talking about law changes, because we all need to be informed as to what's happening. And, we haven't touched on VAR, have we? And the nonsense that's been going on with that in the last 3 seasons here in England, when, yes, it's worked quite well in the MLS. So just harping back, if the rumours are correct that Howard Webb is coming back to manage the referees on the PGMOL, that's the Football League and the Premier League, I hope that he will use people like Mark Elsey to inject some humanity into refereeing and some communication skills, and probably get them to push them a bit harder on football. Because the one thing is that I think that it's that enthusiasm that comes through. Howard is I worked with him for a number of years, setting targets that he achieved, and he's got a learning here. He's also got a view that, with VAR, he introduced it into America with a guy called Greg Barkey. So Howard, if you're taking this show and you are going to become the boss of the PGMOL, please knock on the door of your assistant, Greg Barkey, and get him to come across and take over the control and management of VAR, because in America, he's done quite a superb job.
And I suppose that was my last question. Are you disappointed? I mean, we sort of, and this is nothing against Howard at all, but I mean, are you disappointed in a way that someone like Mark Halsey looks like he may be getting overlooked for that sort of job again? Because he comes across as being like almost like the Brian Clough of refereeing type thing, where he's, he just, because of certain things, they sort of overlook him all the time. Is that a bit of a disappointment that he's not been involved before and now?
I know a lot about Mark Halsey, and I know the way he's been treated by the Premier League in particular. I'm obviously not going to be careful what I say. I think that he's been treated unreasonably and unfairly. I do think a man of his experience and expertise and good communication has a role to play in refereeing, and they should find a position for him. If that's not the boss to run the show, it's to actually perhaps even be a referee coach, to be around the current modern referees, to even get involved in refereeing at the Football League level, to bring referees through, to give them encouragement, to follow his skill sets. I think it's disappointing. There's another guy that I would have used, and that's Jeff Winter up in the Northeast. This Paul Durkin, who I did employ as a coach, and who they dispensed with his services, and I couldn't believe it, because he was a top referee. So there are lots of people out there that maybe some are past the retirement age like myself, but I do believe that there are sufficient people that can help refereeing to become, in England, where it's always been in the past, to be, if you like, the focal point of leading the world. And we're not at this moment in time. We're well off that pace. We haven't even got a VAR guy going to the World Cup. You know, fortunately, we've got 2 referees going to the World Cup this time. I think they deserve their appointments. But in the last World Cup, we didn't have somebody go. So, yeah, I mean, I think that I don't think it's a cut and dried situation with Howard Webb, because he's still got to December, I think, part of his contract with the MLS. I think he's been recognised as doing a brilliant job in the MLS, and I suspect that they will try to tempt him financially to stay. So the PGMOL should be going through the right process, and that is they should be advertising it, and then they should be doing the interviewing and to find the right person. But as soon as they do, they should be waving bye-bye to Mike Riley, because we don't want him for another season influencing negatively refereeing in this country.
Absolutely. Well, listen, Keith, it's been an absolute pleasure. I cannot tell you how much I've enjoyed the last couple of shows that we've done with you. It's been absolutely phenomenal, and it'd be lovely to have you on our Monday night show with Keith, because I know Keith would have a lot of questions to ask you as well. So that'd be fantastic if you would be able to come on one of those.
Yeah, absolutely.
When we start in August. But a massive thank you for that. Real pleasure. Thank you from everybody in our level of football for what you did for refereeing in this country. A massive thank you. It means a lot. And as I say, for spending that time with us. We'll be back for another episode of My Life in Football, when we've got another huge guest coming on to join us. Mr. Lawrence Jones is going to come on and join us from the FA in our next episode of My Life in Football. But until then, from me and from Keith, good night.